This is the It's Time to Refresh podcast with Brad Refresh, the podcast about life, music, traveling, shit, literal shit that is, and weird and wacky stories with Brad, and a range of guests from the planet Earth. Feel free to share the pod with your pals, your mom, your neighbor's dog, or even your shrink. It's all fun. You can follow our Facebook group called It's Time to Refresh Community, or It's Time to Refresh on Instagram. Write into the pod, ask questions, and share your stories. Enjoy the pod.
Hey kid, what time is that?
It's time to refresh.
You all right? How we doing? Just want to take 2 minutes of your time before we start this week's podcast to tell you about our Patreon. Patreon is a tool that we're using to help the podcast grow, give you better content, and, well, as I said, just let the podcast grow. So we've got 3 tiers. The first tier, there's only 20 of these spaces available, and it's £1 for life, and that's for It's Time to Refresh Originals. So if you've tuned in from day one and you want to join the cause, you can sign up for £1. Just follow the link in the description. We've got the standard Patreon, which you get access to bonus episodes, some exclusive content, Patreon specials, which we'll be recording, and early access to all future episodes. So you'll be getting them on a Tuesday instead of a Friday, which I think is fucking amazing for £3. That's less than a coffee. And then we've got our legend status VIP Patreons, which is £10. And that gets you tickets to all my gigs, and it will get you free entry to any It's Time to Refresh associated events, gigs in the future. So that's a little hint of what's coming up in the future. If you do like the podcast, then please share it with your mates. We are trying to grow this little thing we've got going. We've got some amazing guests coming up in the future as well, and we want this to go bigger and better. So sign up at Patreon at patreon.com/It's Time to Refresh. Thank you. Enjoy the episode. Hello, how are we doing? We are back for episode 22 of It's Time to Refresh, the podcast. It's starting to get to a point now where I'm losing track of numbers and everything like that, so it's just one of these things. Hope you have been enjoying the last episodes. We've had quite a journey in such a short amount of time. We've covered some miles, we've covered some stories with some amazing guests. Which brings me on to my next guest today. What an introduction. Alan James, formerly known as Alan Skipper. Bounce producer, which heavily influenced by Hard House. Been producing it a few years now. We'll get into his story, you know what I mean? It's just one of them things.
Hello.
Highly rate this guy. He's released a couple of tracks with me. You've done... the last release on Chubby Tunes, which was a remix of one of my tunes.
The World, yeah.
Yeah, The World. Check out some of his stuff on SoundCloud and that as well. If you like that style, which we're going to get into now talking about, you'll really enjoy it. So how are we doing, mate? All right?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, thanks very much. How are you?
I'm good. A bit tired from driving. I've been to Cardiff. I've been to Barry Island to go to the pleasure bit random, but it was where Gavin and Stacey was at, and then I've came from there up here, which was 2 hours 40 minutes, and then I've got to go from here, which is another
a bit of a mission,
3 or 4 hours home. So it's gonna be intense. But yeah, I've thought about having you on before, but like we said when we talked, that's a bit far away. Like from me to you, it is about 3 to 4 hours or somewhere along them lines, and I'm never down this way much, but I thought, why not try it out? Because this would be very like the right time to do it.
Yeah, appreciate it, and thanks very much for coming over.
Yeah. So from last night, I will just start from last night. Basically, last night where did you go to?
Okay, last night I was at the Shed event in Birmingham.
Right.
So Shed, for people that don't know, is like a hard house brand that's very sort of local to the West Midlands.
Right.
I wasn't there for the whole event though, because so I went back to work after 6 weeks off. I'm a teacher, so I get good holidays. But I went back to work on Tuesday, and then suddenly, if you've had 6 weeks of going to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning, getting up at like 10 or 11, and then suddenly, you go back to the normal 9 to 5. Well, I say that, I have to be at work 8 o'clock most days. So, I was shattered yesterday. I had just put my head down for 5 minutes or so. Next thing I know, it's 7:30. It's like, I'm meant to be at the event in half an hour, and I had to work at where it was. But yeah, it's a hard house event, and primarily, but they're playing more and more bounce. So like Jamie Russell from Jamie and Justin from Bounce Factory was playing a bounce set, and Anto and Gavin or Eggman, they played a bounce set as well, and 12-inch thumpers were there as well. And it was a good night. I couldn't do the whole thing, but I thought, I'm going to turn up and do the bit I could. So.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. It's good to see that you go out and support the events, even if you're not on as well. I love that. It's really good.
Yeah, I think. There are some DJs who don't, who want to get their first booking that don't go out at all, and I don't understand it. I mean, I've got friends who run Juicy in Nottingham who say, they get so many people messaging them saying, when are you going to book me? Can I come play a set? And they're like, well, you've never been to our event. You might not even like our event. Come and see our event first. Come support the scene. Come to the event, and then talk to us about bookings afterwards. So
absolutely, it's one of them things as well. Like it's like I said to you off the pod. Like you're really passionate about the music. Like I said, me and you are like on a very similar wavelength where we might sometimes overthink situations in, say, like making a track. You might be like, really, like, we'll get into this again, but you seem to know what you want when you produce a track. Like, you know what style you're going for, you know what you enjoy, before we get into this podcast as well, I just want to mention quickly, this will be very interesting for those who are on that wavelength, because I feel like we can get in-depth discussions with maybe a track or an event, and you and people who know Alan will be like, they know the little short bio he does when he puts a status up on Facebook, which is summarising something, and he'll go into the long bio, and it's a big descriptive thing into if he's just been to an event or produce a track or put out a mix, and it's explaining why he does it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on, because you can see a lot of passion in what you do. And it does shine through. Yeah,
and just going back to what I was saying about events, like I'm not saying people should go to events purely to try and get a booking.
Yeah.
But if you don't enjoy going to events, why should you be playing that event anyway?
Exactly, yeah. I can 100% agree with that. So I know we've got off on a little tangent before we started, but I just wanted to introduce you to people who might not know who you are. But as I say, you are building a following within the sort of Midlands bounce hard house scene right now. So yeah, we'll start from the beginning with you then, if that's okay, because I don't know a great deal about the man that is Alan James. So
okay.
Where did it all start, music, for you?
Okay, when you say where did it start, I saw when you spoke to Dave Gray, he was originally going to start with his first booking, but he said, let's go further back.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, do I go right back to when I got into dance music?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so 1996, Sash, Ecuador.
Right.
Amazing
Great
track.
tune, great tune,
Fantastic track. So that was kind of my gateway into dance music.
Yeah.
From there, I saw a TV advert for like a Creamfields album or The Annual or something. And it was mixed by Judge Jules, and I thought, well, I really liked that bit of dance music. Let's listen to a bit of Judge Jules and sort of see what that is. And that's we're going into the late 90s now.
How old are you at this point, sorry?
Oh, I must have been. I was born in 83, so we're talking sort of 14, 15 at the point I started listening to Judge Jules. And this was just as trance was exploding.
Right.
So I naturally got into trance, into lots of Lange stuff and lots of Ferry Corsten and all his different geysers.
I knew there was a reason I liked you, because that is amazing. Like, Ferry Corsten's my hero, so...
Yeah, and this is like before I was ever... a lot of people get into dance music through clubbing.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been clubbing at this stage. I got into it just by listening to it off the radio.
Was your friends into it? Like
no.
Not at all?
No, not at all. Right. They're all sort of indie kids, rock kids. My friends.
My core group of friends, there's 4 of us, and I'm the only one who likes like any sort of dance music, really. And then obviously I've said it on the podcast before, but I'm a massive fan of like pop punk and stuff like that as well. So I've got quite a range.
Well, you did that Paramore mix, didn't you? Remix.
I did the Paramore remix,
which
yeah.
I rate.
A lot of people like that, but I strongly dislike it for 2 reasons. 2 reasons being the mix down, and it's really dated and awful, and I haven't got the project anymore to go back over it and tidy it up and clean it up in bits. And the second reason is Like Paramore Misery Business is a great track, and I didn't want to like ruin a great track. Like people,
you didn't ruin a great track.
No, but you know what I mean. People say that like when you see, for instance, like somebody write a piece of music and it's like this doesn't never need to be remixed because it's like great.
No, there is no piece of music that's above being remixed, in my opinion.
Oh, I don't know, because I don't know, like it's one, and sometimes you get pleasant surprises though, because you'll hear a tune and it will be like, that's amazing, right? But then you'll hear a remix of it when you thought you didn't need remix, and it's like, wow, this is like blew out the water. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, I didn't want to like. That's why I like didn't do another pop punk one, because I thought I don't want to like ruin tracks that mean so much to me. Like they're perfect as they are, with the fast guitars and the pop punk drums and stuff like that. And I just think, yeah, if I bounce this up, I might be doing it a discredit, if anything. Like, but then again, a lot of people liked it, so it's one of them, isn't it?
And I do also listen to a bit of rock music, a bit of indie and so on.
Yeah, but yeah, in my friends group, there's like us four, and it's like there's me, who's obviously the big bounce head who loves all sorts of genres, and then there's the two others who have no interest in it, and then there's one who like. He grew up with his, like, I think his mum listened to it, or his sister listened to dance music, and he was like secondhand knows what Darude Sandstorm is, or secondhand knows like Sun is Shining by like Bob Marley and the thing. So he knows like sort of secondhand what it is, but he's got zero interest in it as well. He's also
my parents listened to the Carpenters and ABBA, so that's a bit different.
Great, by the way, I love it.
but the Carpenters was sampled on oh, it's going to annoy me now. I'll tell you what, Brad Canadian later on, like, there's a Hard House tune which not many people know, but it samples.
Fantastic, by the way.
I can't think what it was now. Die Witness.
Right.
Do you know Die Witness? Observing the Earth.
Vaguely.
Not to worry. Anyway, it samples the Carpenters.
I will
anyway.
listen to it on the way back though, just to make sure.
But yeah, so after trance, like Judge Jules then naturally moved into hard house as that kind of replaced maybe not the right word, but so kind of took over from trance. And then 2001, I mean, up until then, I was living in Norfolk in a scene area. There wasn't really any sort of real clubbing scene where I lived.
Yeah.
But then I moved to Leeds for university,
right.
And this was 2001 as hard house exploded.
It's a massive hub as well, Leeds, for all kinds of music. Like, I've got friends who obviously will have in common who are into hard house. I've got friends who are into drum and bass. I've got friends who are into like bass music as well. That's really big with the kids at the minute. And house music's big as well. Like, it's a garage that's also big in or was big in Leeds. Like, what do they call it? Is it niche? Do you know niche? Is it? It's like, I don't know what it's called, organ house. It's like,
okay.
Do you know what it's really popular in like the early 2000s. I'll send you some bits later,
okay.
But like, it's like Leeds is like a big hub where everything, it's because it's so multicultural. There's a bit of everything in there. So yeah, go on. You were saying.
No, not at all. But yeah, so at this point, I moved to Leeds. Obviously, I'm already into hard house.
Yeah.
Already playing vinyl at home. You're not out, just at home. And then I moved to Leeds, and suddenly there's this huge explosion of hard house. And I mean, my first night out, Rachel Orban playing Club Evolution Room 2. It was only Room 2 that was this night. And that was like absolutely incredible. And that was the first night I ever heard Tony DeVille The Dawn.
Right.
The first night I ever heard there's like an Olive You're Not Alone bootleg.
Yeah.
That was played and by Volkswagen. Eventually got hold of it. And yeah, suddenly this music that I loved, there I am in a club scene with other people that are loving it, and absolutely incredible. And so I was in Leeds for 4 years and loved the hard house scene there.
Right.
Sun Essential North I discovered, and Sun Essential North is just the most amazing event, or was. And so yeah, fantastic times. And then after that, I moved back to Norfolk, and I kind of stopped going out to these sorts of events.
You're still listening at
still listening at home, but didn't really have Facebook wasn't around back then, so wasn't really connected to anybody. And sort of my best mate that I went clubbing with, my best clubbing mate, He moved to Wales, and I moved to Norfolk. So, you know, I stopped going out to hard house events or to trance events or anything like that for 10 years. But I missed it.
Yeah.
And towards the end of this time, I got to hear some tracks by the Laminators, particularly the remix of Till Tears Do Us Part.
What year is this then? 2000 and...
We're heading towards 2015. We're not quite there. And Refrigerator, which is still possibly my favourite track of all time.
Very different when that came on the scene. I remember it happening, and it was around the buzz of, I think they were building towards maybe a Tidy Weekender, and there was a massive, like, I remember hearing this and I was like, what is this? So I went down a little rabbit hole of like what Laminators was, and then I was just like, this is different, like, because it is different in comparison.
So different.
To so go on, you were saying.
Yeah, so I then saw the Tidy Weekender 20 advertised. I'd never been to a Weekender. I'd got some of the Weekender CDs from when I lived in Leeds though, and I just posted on Facebook. It's like, at this point, not knowing anybody who liked hard dance music at all.
Yeah.
And I just posted, didn't want to go to this. And the first time I posted it, nobody replied to it. And I then thought, the Laminators, you know, I held them in such high regard. I needed to go to this event. So I posted a second time, look, does anybody want to go to this? I think it's going to be really fun. And this lady I worked with, or used to work with, she said, well, it's not really my thing, but it sounds different. I'll go to that for a laugh. And so the two of us, we went, she came up from London to meet me in Norfolk. I then drove it from Norfolk to Southport. We went to the Tidy Weekender 20. I had the most incredible weekend and made some friends who I then went out to other events with. And then on the Sunday night, the Laminators set. I didn't know Wayne Johnson was the Laminators at this stage. And that weekend literally changed my life. I was like, this is amazing. So I then started going out to lots and lots of events, commuting from Norfolk. It actually, stupid though it may sound, like it never occurred to me that I could go from Norfolk to Birmingham for an event, or from Norfolk to Leeds just to go to an event. That had never occurred to me. Because
if you're not in the loop though, then it can be one of them things, like you might not, we're talking maybe pre-Facebook, but pre-Facebook you might not know. I know they used to advertise, there used to be odd advertising like Mix Mag or DJ Mag. They'd be like, oh, we've got a weekender coming up, but like you wouldn't get an average hard house advertisement where you'd see it off social media. I've got a question. It's so far what you've been saying. See the friend that you came with you. Did they know what hard house was? Or
she didn't, not really. No, she listened to a tiny bit of it, and not until I'd introduced her to it. And it's not really her thing. She's not been to any events like that since. But she just thought, well, it'll be something different. And
did she enjoy it? Like because it's always I always find it fascinating that people who, from an outsider's perspective, come. And is it because we're too enthralled in it that we love it, or is it like, or is there something genuinely magical about it? I
think she enjoyed the experience of doing something different, but wouldn't want to do it again. And she's not been to any hard house events since then.
Okay, that's just out of curiosity. That's all.
I don't want to make it sound like I ditched her kind of thing, but I did then find some friends who live in Norfolk, as it happened, some of them who then were. I mean, this guy would drive from Norwich to Birmingham to come to events over here, and it was like, well, where I live was on the way, so you come pick me up for some events, and then I discovered more and more events. That there's one in Kettering I was a big fan of, started going out more, and then you very quickly, as you go to events, find, even if you don't know anybody at first, you very quickly find it's the same faces. You say hello to people, and then Facebook, love it or hate it, is really good for after you've been to an event, getting to know some of the people that you were there with, and then you see them again the next time, and by now you know the names and you're able to talk to them and have a conversation with them, and it's sort of like it explodes. And at this point, the vast majority of my sort of contacts on Facebook are people that the people that I know on my Facebook are mainly people I know through music now.
That's interesting. What I was going to ask you is that when you went to that Tidy Weekender, how was it that when you watched the Laminators set, was it all you imagined, or was it like, did it exceed expectations, or what was that?
It exceeded any expectation I could possibly have of what an hour of music could be. it was absolutely magical. I mean, it's every little thing, like when you hear the Laminators rings sample in their version of Wizard of the Sonic, they put in little Sonic ring samples, and I'm like, I'd never not heard that before. I was like, this is absolutely incredible. So
attention to detail, that's what we're talking about off the pod.
We were before we went live. We were talking about attention to detail, and that's the sort of thing
that.
So that set, I mean, I said at the time that's the best set I've ever heard, and it's actually in Wayne's description of the when it uploaded to SoundCloud, he said one lad said it's the best set I'd ever heard, but I do have to ask, have you ever heard more than one set before? But it's like it was amazing.
Did you talk to Wayne after the event or after his set or anything like that?
So at the event, no. I didn't speak to him in person. I still at this point, didn't know that was Wayne Johnston I'd just seen.
Right, okay.
I mean, the Laminators Facebook page lists it as somebody called Joe and John or something. It's one of their little jokes.
Yeah.
But from the outside, you don't know that it's a joke. So I genuinely believe it was two people called Joe and John or something. Ralph Refrigerator was down as being the Laminators and Wayne Johnston, but I didn't know that was actually a way of saying he was, it was him and Alf Bamford. So, I started talking to him online after that, and then met up with him, I don't know, some months later. And then saw him play a few more events before he sadly retired.
Did you know of Wayne Johnson beforehand? Like, did you know of his mixes or anything? Like, so did you know the Laminators or did you know Wayne Johnson?
I only knew the Laminators, and I'd only heard of Wayne Johnston because the Refrigerator is officially by the Laminators and Wayne Johnston.
Right, okay,
that's the only place I'd ever heard his name.
So when you check out his mixes online, you'll be a bit overwhelmed because there's just hundreds of series of different I think that they're fantastic. We talk about it off pod. We were saying about I love the smile things. I think that they were different.
Contagious, Booty and Mesh.
Yeah, nobody's sort of done what he's done since. Like he had a very themed way of going about things, and I love that. Sadly, obviously he did retire, and probably the only DJ I know who's actually stuck to retirement as well. Like when he said it was his last set, he hasn't come back as far as I'm aware. I wish he would mind, but I think there was still a whole lot more left in the tank.
Lot of people wish he would. I mean, I understand his stance is that he thinks that people are paid to go and see that set on the basis that it's his last ever set, and he thinks he'd be doing them an injustice if then it wasn't his last set. I can see where he's coming from, but he is the only DJ I can think of who's done a retirement and actually stuck to it in that way. He said, incidentally, that if I was to, the closest I've got to getting out of retirement, I think if I get married, then I think he's agreed to play. And also, if I arrange a boat party that is free for people to go to, so nobody's paying to go and see it, then him and Charlie Bosch will do a Bounce into Hardcore set.
Right.
So if I win the lottery, that's happening. But
okay. Wayne, if you're watching as well, I've never actually met you in person, but obviously I've listened to all the mixes and everything like that. I think really his style is very similar to you in regards to he knows what he likes in his music, and it translates so well when you listen to his sets because you know what to expect with him. And so if you're listening, honestly, no one's gonna feel like that you just retirement and then came back. Like it's been what now? Is it 7 years?
Yeah, to March 2017.
That was it Bounce Factory?
It was Bounce Factory.
Was it 2017?
March 2017.
Oh, sorry. So it's been 5 years. Sorry.
5 years. Sorry. Yeah.
Right.
A bit.
Right. So come back. It's fine. No one. You'll kick yourself later on when you decide to do a comeback in 15 years' time, and you feel like 20 years worth of memories that you could have made and make people smile. There you go. Look at that.
Smile, nice.
No, yeah. But I honestly, it's a sound which I've talked about online before with you. That sound is missing within the scene at the minute. There is not many people doing it. I know that the Bounce Factory guys have just released an album, very similar to that. You do your style, but like I say, yours is more like trance influenced.
Yeah.
And then you've obviously got like the people out there who dip the toe in occasionally, like Tom Berry, Dan Diamond's another name, Zach F. Them sort of names where you'll see an odd track by them every couple of years now, or you'll see like a big bunch of tracks at once and then nothing for a while. But Wayne just come back. That's what I'm trying to say. The moral of the story. Just
Yeah, with 2000, when you said 7 years, you're thinking 2015 because that's when I saw the Laminators at Tidy Weekender.
Oh no, I thought he retired in 2015.
Okay.
I thought that was when he did the last that last set on. I listen to it quite often on SoundCloud.
It was working down a little bit after that. But yeah, 2017.
Right, so I've rudely interrupted you once again.
Not at all.
It's just good to get into the thing. So you discovered events in Kettering and sort of around
and lots in the Birmingham,
now.
and then a few up north as well, in Leeds. And so that was how I got back into the hard house scene. It was more. The scene was hard house, but what I enjoyed listening to was bounce.
Did you know this at this point?
So I mean, I'd never really heard the term bounce until when I came back. I mean, I looking back, some of the tracks that I had from years and years ago, like we were talking about Dinky just before. So I've got some Dinky tracks. I suppose they're bounce really, but I thought them as hard house at the time.
I think everybody did, but you know what I mean. It sort of evolved into its own subgenre from there.
And there's a version of Bellissima that I can't think of it by now, but that now I definitely call bounce. But I thought it was just bouncy hard house back then. But so that's how I got back into the scene. Like I say, more the hard house scene, but what I was listening to was bounce. And then a couple of years later, 2017, the way things were going with work, it just was very convenient for me to leave my job that I've been in for since 2005. So I was looking for a new job. At the same time, I was thinking, well, shall I relocate, and go somewhere that wasn't Norfolk? And just everything coincided at the same time. It just seemed right for me to move over in this direction. So I moved over to the West Midlands. And then not that long after that, I got my first booking at an event called Splat. It's a very small event in Birmingham.
So when you came back, and you said you went back to the Tidy Weekender and stuff, I know I keep going back to it, but were you come back as a DJ? What was the situation? Were you producing? Were you DJing? When did the DJing thing? When did that ball get rolling? I mean,
I've been mixing at home since 2000. Right. So when people say, when did you start DJing? Some people, to make it sound longer, I think, go back to when they first got their first set of decks.
Right.
I'd never played out at this point. Right. In terms of production, again, it kind of depends when do you go back. I normally count it from when I bought FL Studio.
Right.
In which case, that was about the same time as at Tidy Weekender, because I was so hyped up from it.
Yeah.
That I think pretty much straight after that, I got a demo of the free demo of FL, and then I bought it, and then I bought the higher version. And then
what's your thought process there? Sorry, I've interrupted you again, but it's just when you say things, it's making me think of questions. I don't want to lose that sort of thread. But when you've then been to the Tidy Weekender and you've came away, was your thought of, I want to produce this music, I want to make something that sounds like the Laminators, or were you thinking, I want to be a DJ so I can mix tracks like them? What was the process when you came away? Because obviously you said you came away and you downloaded the FL thing. Were you like, I want to make music, this is what I want to do? Like, where did that come from? Was it? I mean, again, inspired.
I say when I start producing, I go back to when I bought FL. The things I was making in FL at that point aren't things that anybody will want to listen to.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I do a studio day and collab for somebody, I'll play them something I made in 2000 a few times. When somebody is like just starting to try, and they've just got FL themselves, or they just started to try and they've just made the first track and they're like, it's not very good, and then they listen to something that somebody's been doing it a bit longer has made, and they're a little bit harsh on themselves. I'm like, well, you're already ahead of where I was when I bought FL.
Yep.
And I'll play them the terrible nonsense that I was making back in 2015. I actually, if you want to go back to where production really started on my PlayStation 1 in like 1999 with that music game, and then Music 2000. I spent so much time on that. I was not making anything that would be playable by today's standards, but
it's just the fun of intricacy of like making something and being creative.
Yeah, and simply like finding things out what works, like putting a clap on every second kick drum. All of that I was doing back in 2000. So I was at this event, and the Tidy Weekender event, and I thought I just really enjoyed the music so much. I want to try and make something, not with a view to anybody else wanting to hear it or being sent to anybody. I just want us to try and have that experience of making something myself.
Yeah.
So in terms of the production side of things, that's when I got FL, and I just gradually produced more and improved over time. If anybody's watching this who is in the position of, you've just bought whatever DAW of your choice, and you're just starting out and you're trying to make some progress. What I did is I was trying to make the tracks by myself, and then I would go to an engineer and have a studio day, and then not with the studio day of just because I want a shortcut to a track, but a studio day of like, I want to learn, and see what they're doing and pick up so much. So the first person I had engineer for me was Alf Bamford. He had just moved to Australia, and he was doing online engineering, like before online engineering was really a thing.
Right. So what you've done is you've started producing music, and you went to the best possible person for it. Like, honestly, like I know I've talked about a few different people on this podcast, and sort of bigged them up, but there isn't many who come close to Alf's level of production at all. That whether that be bounce, hard dance, hardcore, trance, hard trance, like. He's very good. Like
Very good doesn't cut it.
Yeah. I've said this to a couple of people in person as well when we've talked about like inspirations and producers. There isn't many people out there, right, who I listen to within our scene and I'm mesmerised by. Like, he can produce something and then he'd maybe do this sort of, I don't know, maybe do something in the track and I'd be like, I'm not belittling anybody else by saying this, but like, say someone sends me a track and then I'll hear it and I'm like, oh, how did they do that? Give me half an hour and I'll have figured out how to so they did this. With Alf, like some of the stuff that he does, I'm like, how the fuck did you do that? Yeah, it's mind blowing. Like he's a level above most people who's held in high regard. He's one level above that, I think. And I'm not just blowing his trumpet. Like I think he's probably one of my favourite producers out there, if not my favourite, just because of the quality, the style, and yeah, it's just great. And I've just finished masturbating over him, but you know what I mean. It's just what it is. Like that, when you've went for that studio day, you've went to the best possible person you could go to.
Yeah, on the basis that I knew it was amazing. His technical stuff, as in hard trance technical, I love that.
Yeah.
But also, when I discovered that he was the engineer behind the laminators, I was like, that's the person who's made Refrigerator. Oh God, it's the best track ever made. He's the person who's engineered it.
Right.
He's the best person. And then when he advertised, sort of saying, is anyone fancy trying this? And so I was absolutely well up for that. And so he engineered 3 tracks for me. A hard trance track called Oppenheimer.
Right.
Then Flying Home.
Right.
And then a hardcore track, which I've never released.
Why have you not released it?
The honest truth is because it's a cover of a Placebo track. Every You, Every Me, or Every Me, Every You.
Yeah.
And I was originally going to use a cover vocal, and in the end, we went to a karaoke version and got the vocal off there.
Right, okay, yeah.
And back then, I was so paranoid about copyright that I was worried that the karaoke version would come after me for copyright on this vocal. So I was like, do you know what? And besides, I also now feel that I don't really gain anything from releasing it because I'm not trying to, I'd love to at some point make hardcore, but it's not something I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not there for promoting myself in the hardcore scene. So apart from 5 minutes of fame, I don't really get anything for releasing that track.
I do. I get to listen to it. No, but do you know what I mean?
It's on. There's one hardcore mix on my SoundCloud, and it's on there. And that at the moment is the only place on the internet.
I'll have to find it and I'll dig it out. But yeah.
So he engineered those 3 for me. Now, in terms of the name on them, they don't carry his name. I regret not putting them out as like Alan and Friends or something. Alf doesn't like his name being on tracks he engineers because he engineers so much, And not all the tracks he engineers, he says he necessarily really likes. They're not necessarily things. Sometimes people go in a direction that isn't what he would want to do.
Yeah, it's not him as an artist.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why he doesn't. So it's his choice not to have his name on them. But I always hate the idea that anybody's going to think that I've engineered it. So as soon as anyone says they like Flying Home, the first thing I say to them is, "Oh, but I didn't engineer it."
Yeah,
that's no problem at all with people using engineers. It's just that I like to be open and make it clear to people that if you're going to come collab with me, I like to think I've made a lot of progress recently, but I'm not at the Flying Home standard.
Right. Well, I've got a little story behind that. I know we're sort of going off a tangent again, but I worked with an engineer 2016 possibly. It wasn't because I wanted to get a track made, because at this point I was already releasing tracks myself. It was more the fact of I wanted to get sort of see if I was missing anything in my arsenal of production. So it's like, if I'm going with him, even if I walk away with one little trick, that's it. That's fine. Yeah. So I produced a track with Glenn Walker, Energy Syndicate.
Oh right, yeah.
Right. And basically what it was, we did 2 tracks in one day, if I remember rightly.
Wow.
And because I drove over to, he was living in, was it Newcastle at the time? Possibly. Living in Newcastle at the time, and I went there. I got there for like 8 a.m. and then I like was there right through the day. I think we'd done like sort of like 12 to 14 hours in the studio.
Wow.
Like it was intense, because I remember like going for food, then coming back, and then we were stopping for like a brew break and stuff. And it was like, but I just wanted to pick up on what I could do. And then at the end of it, obviously he's engineered for people before. He said to me like, "Oh, there you go," and he named it just as Refresh, whatever tune it was, right? And I was like, "Oh no, doesn't want his name on it." Oh, it's totally understandable, because there's a difference between an engineer and an artist. Because some engineers necessarily don't even release music. I know people who engineer music who don't have any online presence other than being an engineer. They don't have an artist page. They don't. So I was like, that's fair enough, but I can't claim I did that. So I released it on my label as M&W, which was Milburn and Walker, but
no one will know what the W is. Yeah.
So M&W.
I like that.
Well, it was just a way of saying, listen, I didn't do this, and I don't want to claim that I've done it. And I went to Glenn about it and I said, listen, I'm going to release it under this name. And he was like, I actually like that. That's cool.
Yeah, that is.
Because it's got no relation to him. But at the same time, I'm not saying, oh, look at me, I've produced this amazing track and whatnot. But yeah, we produced 2 really good tracks that day. It was M&W, which is Gotta Tell You. I don't know if you've heard that track.
I don't know the name.
It was a cover of...
But then I wouldn't know that M&W was you anyway from that.
I actually did a remix of the track that I did, which it sounds backwards, but I thought I didn't put my own spin on it because I like the vocal. It was Gotta Tell You by Samantha Mumba. Do you know that tune?
I know Samantha Mumba, I don't know the tune.
Oh, you'll know the tune if you hear it. It's very catchy. And basically, like, I released that, and then I did a remix, which it sort of fell flat because it was a bit too cheesy. It was a cover of... it was M&W Complicated, but it was a cover of Avril Lavigne Complicated, which very cheesy, yes. But the whole time I put it out, I never just put Refresh on it and said, look at me, this is amazing. It was M&W. I don't care if you don't know who it is, because at this point I'd never used that alias before, so it's one of them things. So it just got released, and then that was it. That was the end of that. I didn't want to, like you say, you don't want it. You feel a bit naughty going. Putting Alan James on it, saying, "Oh, I did this," and it's like, don't feel bad about that. Like obviously they don't want their name on it, but like as you say, Alan James and Friends would have worked, or something along them lines.
Yeah, the and Friends is also like almost like a link back to DJ Sakin and Friends.
Yeah,
take your mind, and subsequently I think to myself, is that what DJ Sakin was going for? Is that like? Because I always thought back in 1998, DJ Sakin and Friends, what is that? And then I wonder, is it like DJ Sakin was the producer, not the engineer, and was the and Friends the engineer? And probably never know, but
I think it was like DJ Jurgen as well. I'm not sure. I might be wrong, but I remember that he did like a DJ Jurgen and Friends like EP, and it was like or release, and it was like several different people credited on it and whatnot, but like. That could be another one of them things. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, I think there's ways and means of using an engineer and not claiming it to be like.
Yeah.
I've seen people go, and I'm not going to name names because it's quite frankly embarrassing, but I've seen people go in a studio with someone, come out and say, "Look at this, I've produced this," and I'm like, "You're using their samples which they're known for. You obviously haven't made this like." But each to their own. I'm not going to think. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out if someone claiming to make a track and then it sounds exactly like somebody else. Then it doesn't take a genius to work it out. But we won't go down that rabbit hole. We'll carry on with your story.
And there's nothing against engineers and nothing against people using engineers.
Yeah.
It's just that where the credit is trying to claim that you've done the. I mean, I have seen in Hard House, I have seen a couple of instances where somebody's gone in, done their first couple of tracks with engineers, and then they are trying to give other people sort of feedback on their tunes as if they're, and sort of trying to, it just comes across certain people, just a small number of people I'm talking about, but they come across as if they're trying to imply that they've done everything completely by themselves.
That
And then they
makes me
very
feel
clearly
ill.
haven't.
Like,
Yeah, it's not good.
The thought of it is just like.
And I'm just so polar opposites. That's why I'm always up front. As soon as anyone says anything about Flying Home, I love this Alan James or whatever track, Flying Home. I'm like, I didn't engineer it. That's the first thing I say.
And
my idea
it's
is
not a problem.
But
Yeah, it's not a problem. Don't get too hung up on it though.
Yeah,
like,
no, not
it's
at
one
all.
of them things.
Not at all.
I don't think because you're so open and honest about it, I don't think anyone would hold it against you and say, well, okay, you've lost all credit there for that. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like that at all.
But
Right,
yeah, so that then, and I screen recorded Flying Home. Alf said that was fine so long as only I ever saw it. So nobody else will ever see this, but I have a screen recording of our studio day and I can see everything on his screen, you know, which obviously was massively helpful. Even when it comes to things like, okay, like with claps. So a lot of sample packs, the claps I found are a bit too dry. So what Alf does is he puts some reverb on it to wetten it out, but then he puts a compressor on, so you're just hearing the very first little bit of the clap at a nice loud volume, and then it goes quieter. And so I was able to look at him do that and pinch his settings for it.
Yeah.
And so that was massively useful. And then after that, I carried on my own productions. Obviously, took a big. I mean, before that, I wasn't doing any mastering on my tracks at all. Literally nothing. I didn't know what mastering was. When you get a track that says master, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So I was not even putting a limiter on.
Right.
Literally nothing.
If you're not taught to do it, then yeah, I can totally relate to this.
So massive step up. You know, I say massive step up. My tracks were still not up to release standard.
Yeah.
But it was a big help. And then I did a similar thing with Charlie Bosch on the first track I did with Charlie, with Wayne Johnson was there for as well. Yeah. So the three of us did a track together. And then again, I mean, although Charlie and Alf actually both use Cubase, but still the ideas that you can see are transferable. So that was a massive help, and that was a big, you know. And again, I sort of I wasn't screen recording, so I did them in person, but I was able to see his plugins and get little and Charlie's such a top guy that, you know, he's keen to help people as well. Like if they go
really
along
nice
to him,
guy, really very approachable as well.
So down to earth as well. I don't think Charlie realizes how good he is.
Yeah, I met him at was it BTRD Wonderland?
Okay.
I'd seen him around for a while, but then first time I met him, I just come across a really nice approachable guy, and like it's an attitude to have. And if he goes far in the scene, which he seems to be doing really well at the minute, then you can see why. Like, because there's, I know I'm saying this about a few people. He's really genuine guy. Absolutely. I want to say another thing as well. Before I lose my train of thought. You were saying about when you were producing tracks and stuff like this. I've had a couple of people message me who watch the podcast saying like about getting into production and they don't know where to begin, and they don't, like, basically they're like saying, show me everything because I want to know how to make a track. And I'm like, it's not that I don't want to do it, I simply don't have the time to sit there and mentor everybody, or I can give quick tips and stuff like that, or messages, or a video. Like, some people do it and I'll give them like a little video of how I did this one thing or how I did this other thing, or they're saying how comes my leads don't sound that good, and then I'll sort of point out something, or why does my bass line not sound as heavy, and just little tiny like minute things. But then there's people who are sending me stuff and they're obviously like the first 6 months into the journey, and they're like, I don't know how to put it bluntly, but they'll just go, I'm shit, I think about giving this up And
6 months.
no, but yeah, do you know what I mean though? Like, no, but because they're not seeing progress. But them 4 months before that, when they've only been 2 months in, is a huge difference already. Like, and I'll say, listen back to what you did then. You're like, oh yeah, that's crap. I'm like, yeah, but look where you are now. He's like, yeah, that's crap. Yeah, but it's less crap.
Yeah.
Don't expect it overnight. Like,
Yeah.
And if you listen, anyone who messaged me and have said this and they're now listening to this, listen to what Alan's been saying. Like, Alan's journey is a good example of if you're willing to put in the hours and the time and the effort and whatnot. It's fine using engineers, but you use it for learning purposes or watch tutorials or learn, and then it won't all come in 6 months. You see some people who are naturally talented musicians and things happen for them in a couple of years, but stick at it, right? That's my only advice. Listen to what you're coming from. I'm not a preacher of any sort, but what I'm saying is, for these people who are looking for a bit of guidance and stuff, listen to what you've said already in this video. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you've went out and you've seen bits, you've talked to people, and how do you do this, or the little clap trick that you were saying about there, and it's like, right, this is how it all falls together. You learn over time. Like, I've often showed people like my earlier stuff, and it's absolutely dreadful. Like, I didn't know what keys or anything was for the first year of my production.
I didn't.
It's like
Major and minor. What's that? You know?
This bass line sounds good with this melody, but I didn't know that. Oh, that's in key. It was like it just sounded all right, and then you educate yourself on it over time, and it is just one big learning curve. And I'm by no means amazing, or anything like that. Same goes with you. Not discrediting you, but what I'm saying is everyone's continuously learning. We were saying about Alf before being an amazing producer. This is one thing that I want to get at. If you asked Alf himself, he'll say he will be learning new tricks all the time. It's like, and that's how you stay at being that level of a great producer, because you're learning things continuously. You're not just like, right, I've reached this level, I don't need to learn anymore, I'll just continue making tracks. Do you really think he's at a level where he's like, I'm going to disregard all these new ideas and ways? Of course you embrace them. That's what you've got to do. Sorry for interrupting you once again.
No, but I'm going to pick up on part of what you said there about timing. I mean, 6 months is nothing.
Yeah.
I would say, even if I disregard all of the things from like using music 2,000 years ago, because it's not like a proper DAW, but I was learning things in there about things like where to put claps, in relation to kicks, and where to put my hi-hats and so on. But even disregarding that, I mean, 6 months in, I was making absolute drivel. I would say I'm now at a point where pretty much any track I make now, I can get signed to a reasonable label. I would say that point took me 6 years, and yet I'm still not there. There are still things I listen to that I can't reproduce. So there's still, so I've made it from there to there. That's the point where you can get signed to decent labels. But if I still listen to like some of the leads on like Alan Ben tracks, and Axel Gear has come back, Ufian from Hardcore, the leads on his tunes, my leads don't sound like that. Rob IYF, when he does a little bit of bounce now, and their leads are still, I try and emulate them sometimes, but I'm not there. So, I've made it to the point where I can get signed to labels. Probably took me about 6 years to get to that point.
Still growing.
And I'm now, 7.5 years in, but I've still got a long way to go to where I want to be. So 6 months is nothing. If somebody is now thinking today, shall I go and make my first track? Thinking 6 months' time, if you're making absolute rubbish, are you going to quit? If you're going to do in 6 months, there's no point starting, because it's not long enough.
A lot of people as well, when they have messaged me and said, I'm thinking about doing it, and then they'll ask me again in 6 months, I'm still considering it. Why don't you do it now? And in 6 months' time, you'll be at that point where you would be, and they're like, and even if you say, no, it is rubbish and whatnot, just do it for another 6 months, and before you know it, you'll be like us, and you'll be like years in, and it's like, oh, where's all that time gone? And you've learned a great deal. Like, it's just what it is, isn't it?
And if you are making something that's rubbish, send it to somebody who you respect, who you want to sound a little bit more like, and ask them for any feedback. Have a really thick skin. I mean, I was saying to you beforehand about, Wayne's feedback on the first things I sent him, but, you've got to have a thick skin. Otherwise, production isn't the thing to go for. Go and do something easy. But where was I going with this? But I've lost my chain of thought.
Well, I'm just going to say something as well.
Okay.
One thing as well. Send it to somebody who you can trust.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Right, because I made the mistake when I was early on, sending it to some people and them just going shite. And that's all
that's what I was saying. Yeah, so you want someone who can give constructive feedback and tell you something that you can do that's going to make it better.
Because the thick-skinned part of me would be like, some people will just go shite, boring, not interested.
Yeah,
it's like, that doesn't
help
do
you to
anything.
make it better.
Yeah, you've just been insulted, if anything. But if someone's going to say, right, I can see what you've gone for here, but if you just move this, or if you just turn this down or turn this up or worked on this area in particular, that's constructive. That's something you can go back to your computer, work on. But if you're just going to message, say, one of your idols or something like that and say, if you get a minute, please listen to this, and then they message you back going shite, and it's just like, you know not to go back to them. Just don't let somebody that you look up to knock you off your perch, because I think that's where a lot of people are, where you say the 6 months to a year in, and they're messaging somebody who's at such a high level, and they're going and they're saying it knocks their confidence. Just go to somebody who you know will give you the time of day to give you some sort of feedback.
Yeah, finding the right people
Yeah.
for feedback is, I mean, it's not as straightforward sometimes, but finding the right people for the right feedback is so beneficial.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking earlier about Wayne, you know, and I've been sending things to Wayne since 2015. He has listened to some absolute rubbish from me.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I sent him, he said, did I want him to be honest? I hope he doesn't mind me telling this.
Mm-hmm.
He said, did I want him to be honest? You know, because sometimes he gets things from people he's never heard of.
Yeah.
You know, he's not going to spend a massive amount of time potentially get into a big discussion with them, a big argument for his opinion. But I said, yeah, you know, I'm not going to get better, and if you're not honest. So he said, you know, right, this is wrong, done like this bit's boring, whole massive list of things to change. And then I think it was, but the kick drum's okay. and
I like it.
And yeah, and there are people I've sent things to for feedback who, some of them I just don't actually agree with some of the things they're saying, and that's fine. You know, thanks very much. I'd appreciate that.
Some things are subjective as well, not objective. Yeah.
If you send something to two people and they both say the same thing, then that's a good indication that it's something you want to change. But yeah, and finding the right people, and I'm sometimes amazed by how willing some people are to give feedback. I mean, we were talking about this before we were on camera as well, but there's one half of Nocturnal by Nature who I've never met the guy, but absolute legend. He sends me so much feedback to the things I've sent him. I'm hoping now I've name dropped him that he doesn't now get 100,000 people sending things and not have time to listen to mine anymore. But and equally there are some people who. But that, having said that, also people have got to remember that if they're sending something to an idol who they don't know, that person kind of doesn't owe them detailed feedback. If they get it, fantastic, and show that you're ready. You thank the person ever so much for doing so. But I think there are probably some people who send things to feedback and expect something. And if they don't actually know that person, I mean, I've had things sent to me, and I'll try and always listen to them and give constructive feedback. And I'm honoured, flattered that somebody wants my opinion, because I don't regard myself as being up there. Yeah. But at the same time, if I was having loads of things sent to me at once, I probably wouldn't have time to. And if you're right at the top, you probably do get so many things being sent to you all the time. Also worth mentioning Amber D's demo drop. That is an avenue that anybody can use to get some feedback. Right. She says she won't play the track if it's not up to a certain standard, and she'll just message somebody some feedback. But there you've got kind of a captive audience. Most of the people watching are producers, and again, some of the people on there, some of the viewers won't necessarily say constructive things. I've had somebody on there. I did a remix of an Amber D track, and somebody I think claimed something was out of key, and Amber listened and she said, "No, it's definitely not out of key." So that you do sometimes get that, and sometimes people almost want to try and big themselves up by finding something that isn't really wrong. But at the same time, that's certainly, if people are struggling to find somewhere for feedback, that's somewhere that anybody can go. And I found Amber's show's been really useful as well.
Fantastic. So if you want to get some feedback, get onto the demo drop for Amber D. Just search for her on Facebook. I'm sure you'll find her. I give, my thing is, right, when I started out, because I sort of out the way of everybody, when I found it hard to like talk to people. Like I'll say look for feedback on something or something like that, and it's like you maybe won't get replies and stuff. And I mean, I couldn't just go, like at this point I couldn't just go to a club because I was so young. I couldn't just turn to a club night in, I don't know, Wigan or somewhere like that and say like, this is my demo, blah blah blah, can you let me know what you think of it? Because obviously I was underage and stuff. So for me it was like, I always give everybody the time of day. If you message me, I might not message you back straight away because obviously you've got life, I've got work, and then obviously my little kid as well, my missus, home life, my dog. So it's like, once I've got all that out of the way, I will make the time of day. I mean, if you message me just with a SoundCloud link, don't expect a reply. Like I purposely avoid replying to them people because I think it's cheeky and I think it's just moronic, if I'm honest. But if you
mean if it's just literally the link and that's nothing else?
That's happened, and then
I thought you meant don't use SoundCloud for a moment.
Oh no, not at all. But the amount of times that people have just done that, and then I've actually had like messages after like, you're not replying then, and I'm like, well, all I've got is a SoundCloud link. Like, what do you expect me to say? But at the same time, I don't expect a big million paragraphs of like why you want me to listen to it. If you just be nice, introduce yourself, and say, "Hi, Brad. Done some music. I would love to hear what you think." That's all you need. I don't want a big thing. But if you're just going to drop a link and expect me to message you back saying, "Yeah, I've just listened to that random link you sent me," even though I didn't know, you might not have meant to send me that, but it just might be my mistake or something. But and then give a big load of feedback. If you're not going to give me the time of day of the message and say, "Hi, I'd love to think about what you think," I don't give you the time of day to actually listen to it. So
yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah, it used to be really bad. In about I still occasionally get them, but I think people soon learn if you're going to do that not to do it. But I remember when, I think it was about 2016-ish, DJs used to just spam like my inbox with like just a link to a mix or a link to a production, and just like, or even times share this, mate, and then just a link. Like, it's just ridiculous. But luckily them people are like, I call them 6-monthers.
Right.
I don't know if you know what it is, but basically like they'll come on the scene for 6 months thinking they're going to get big bookings, and then when it doesn't work out for them after 6 months because they don't feel like they're getting anywhere, they sort of disappear. A lot of them people come and go. You see it in cycles, but yeah, a lot of them people were them people who were just spamming me with like, "Share this mix, pal, share this mix," or just a SoundCloud link. But we'll get off that, back onto your story. We're sort of lost, we've got on a tangent there again. So you got into production, you got your first booking at Splat, and this was 2017, did you say?
No, I moved over here 2017. I think my first booking was 2018.
Right. So how did you get that then? Did you hand a demo in, or?
No, it was, I got mixes on Facebook, mixes on SoundCloud that, so Danny, who runs Splat, or ran Splat, it's not been for I don't know, he's talking about bringing it back, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen. Hopefully. But his events were kind of like no progression, just a mixture of different types of dance music, a little bit of drum and bass, sometimes a little bit of hardcore, a little bit of, and the guy I was following was playing this, so I'm going to say made up genre. But in terms of bookings for it, so it's kind of people that Danny thinks would be interesting to have on. And he had heard of me, and we'd become sort of friends. I mean, we're closer friends now than we were at that point, but I think we'd become friends at this stage. Yeah. And he thought, well, he sounds interesting. I don't know if he'd actually listened to a whole one of my mixes or just a little bit of one, but that was the first event, and it was great because the guy on before me, fingers crossed he doesn't see it, the chances are is pretty slim. The guy before me was playing this bizarre made-up genre to a literally empty club. And I think at that point, I probably, no disrespect to the guy, but I could have played anything and it would have gone down better than the set before.
What was it he was playing? Just like...
I mean, it isn't an established genre. It was literally this guy had... I was talking about creativity, and this is what Danny runs Splat loved about Splat, is having different ideas, and
Did he just go too far off the spectrum?
It was certainly a very long way along some kind of spectrum that wasn't a spectrum I'd normally want to go down.
Right. So was it like drum and bass or
no? It was.
Was it four to the floor music? Is that what it was?
I mean, I'm going back to 2018 now, so I'm going back a fair way and I'm trying to remember a set that I wasn't really interested in listening to. But it was just a bizarre concoction of sounds. That's all I can say. Music is what people want it to be, and
quite avant-garde.
I'm sure there's a market for it somewhere. So I then came on and played some sort of fun, uplifting bounce. I think I definitely did a custom intro for it.
Right.
I might have done a couple of. I think I probably had a few of my tracks in there. The mix is the mix is definitely on my SoundCloud. I haven't listened to it for a while. Some sort of trancey bounce, a bit of laminators in there, I think. Then going into a bit of harder bounce at the end, a bit of progression in there. And it seemed to go down really well. And then a lot of people didn't realise that was my first ever set. So that was where the DJing sort of in public began. And off the back of that, I had some more bookings. Not a massive number, but I was growing quite nicely before the pandemic. Sort of my biggest event was probably Juicy. Well, Juicy over in Nottingham was one of the biggest ones. Rob DeSera was headlining.
Yeah.
So that to me, to be on from where I'd come from to suddenly, there's this guy that just makes music for a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm on a lineup DJing with Rob DeSera.
Legend.
Exactly. And Bring the Bounce Back as well. We had the second Bring the Bounce Back particularly, we had some sort of big names from Midlands Bounce on there.
I feel like that's where I heard of you, maybe, possibly. When obviously I'd heard like bits and bobs you doing under the old name Alan Skipper, and then you'd done that. I'm sure I've seen a video of you and you were playing like I wouldn't talk about this off pod. You were playing back to back with Eggman.
Yeah, I played twice. We've played together.
Yeah, and I think that's where I first started becoming sort of actively listening out for your music. So anything you'd post up, I'd have a little listen or something like that. And then from there, I think that's where I discovered you. So how were them sets? How was Juicy? How was the Bring Back? Is it? Did you go down the route that you wanted to with your creativity in the bounce stuff? Like obviously you were playing other people's music, but as well as your own. How did you find that? How did it feel playing out your own music for the first time?
I mean, when you've got something that you've made yourself and then you play it on a big system and you see it going down well and you hear, and a donk sounds different in a club, to how it does in the studio. Phenomenal sort of euphoric feeling, sort of excitement, adrenaline, all of these things at the same time. We mentioned the back-to-backs with Eggman, so we've had two back-to-backs. One of them was another Splat event. We were booked for a back-to-back. And then the two DJs after us both cancelled. So we ended up we were just told, play as long as you like. Now, at this point in time, the particular club we were in has some very old CDJs that actually only play CDs still. So we were limited to, there's no USB with 1,000 hours of music on it. It was just as many tracks as I'd burnt to CDs. But we had we played just over 2 hours in the end, and had a massive round of applause because we just played over 2 hours to a set that went down really, really well. Juicy, we were the closing set for the last event before lockdown.
Right.
This was maybe 2 weeks before we went into lockdown. So little did we know at that point we would be the final set for until events opened up again. And then the weekend after that, I was playing back in the club where I played the Bring the Bounce Back and Splat events.
Yeah.
A friend had hired the venue for an engagement party.
I remember seeing this. Yeah.
So there was 160 people there, crammed into this little club. And this was, I think, the weekend before lockdown started, possibly.
Yeah. You started building a lot of momentum up. And it was starting to work for you. I think I even messaged you at the time saying, listen, I think I messaged you saying you're doing the right thing. And I've talked to you off pod before and I was saying, I asked you to remix one of the tunes on for the label. It's not like I wouldn't just go and ask random people. Like if I like what you're doing, then I'm obviously going to reach out. I'm going to sit here for like 2 minutes and put him over massively because I feel like you deserve it. And I've said this to you off pod, but I want people to hear this one as well. Like and I hope that you're not offended, which I did say to you before as well. Alan's very much one element away from being great. It's just, I think time's the element that I said to you before. Like, I think give it time over a couple of years, and then you will be held in high regard for that West Midlands bounce. You'd be like a go-to guy for like, oh, we need a West Midlands hard bounce DJ. You will be the first thought in their head. It's just time to get more tracks out, for more people to know who you are, because your style you've nailed to a T. You don't go and follow a trend. If it's big at the minute, you don't go and just follow it. You do what you like. You stick to your guns. You're a very nice, humble guy, very likable, person to talk to as well. And like you're just doing all the things right. But as I say, I think the element is you've got everything nailed. Your production as well, like we're going to get into now, from 2019 till like during the pandemic and everything, you improved massively. Obviously having all that time to do things, but at the same time, like as I say, like you've improved and you're at a level now where there's no reason why you shouldn't be the first person to be booked off. I know there's a lot of hard bounce DJs out there, but they don't produce. If they're looking for a producer, you should be the first go-to guy right now, and I think it's just time that's the issue. Give it a couple of years, and I think you'll be there if you consistently go as you are. That's just me. I could be talking absolute shit, but from my perspective, looking at it, you haven't differed away from the avenue you're going down. You're sticking to what you like, and people appreciate you for that. I've been a bad for this in the past, maybe not so much over the last 4 or 5 years, but go back as far as like 7-8 years ago, I was making tunes for the reason of making tunes, and now I listen back to them and like, because I was following trends, I'm just like, oh, I wish I'd never done that. Like, it's just because you lost your way a bit, and I was just simply doing it just to get my name out there or to get my tunes played, and now I couldn't care about that. For me, it's art over bookings, and art being the tracks. We mentioned the Paramore track before. I did that. If you listen to the first drop in that track, it's like I was just producing what other people were making in the clubs, and it's like a really heavy donk drop. And I listen back to that now, and I was like, if I just went euphoric with it or something, I'd have still played that track. Now I don't even have it loaded on my USBs because it's just like, ugh. Like, because obviously I was just following trends, but I respect you so much that you've stuck to your guns and you've stayed in what you like. And as I say, I think over time things will work out for you. So then I'll just put you over 2 minutes there.
Well, thank you very much for that.
No,
I don't know what to say to that.
No, but you know what I mean. Some people do lose the way, myself included, of what they enjoy rather than and I know a lot of people. You can hear it in people's productions. A lot of people have, and even DJs as well, who don't necessarily produce. They change their style up to suit a certain night. Shouldn't really do that. You should just do what you love. And fair enough if you're doing it to make. You're doing it to make it a living. There's DJs out there who will play music to keep a crowd in and earn their living. But if you're doing this as a hobby and you're doing it as an artist, then do what you love. Don't go and copy another style. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just not right. But yeah, sorry, moving on. So
I think there's a couple of bits to unpick there. So you mentioned about building, and thank you very much, because that's, amazing hearing that. So thank you.
Yeah, no
Especially
problem.
someone that I've looked up to for a long time.
I don't know why you look up to me. Only because I'm tall. That's what we.
But you were saying about building momentum. So I feel that in terms of DJing, I was building momentum very nicely before the pandemic.
Yeah.
The fact that I played both the weekends before the pandemic hit.
It speaks volumes. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Sorry?
It speaks volumes that
both of those events,
frequent.
both the last 2 weekends before we were in lockdown, I was playing out, and I haven't played out since. So in terms of DJing's building momentum, but I wasn't in terms of production and tracks. Like I was still just doing my thing, and I, by this point I got at least a couple of tracks that I'd self-engineered that have been released. There was one on Pumped, which is like one of the hardest tracks that I've made. John Longbottom's label. The track itself has a long story to it, which I could go into, but I'll go off on another tangent if I do. So we'll see if we come back to it. But the so I had one on Pumped, and there was one on was originally Blessed Recording that's been re-released on Lightning Tracks.
Yep.
So I'd had a couple out, but I hadn't had many that I'd self-engineered.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic was a fantastic time to sit at a computer and practice production. And I think when events were about to reopen, I said quite publicly, I said, I don't want to hear any classic sets for the rest of this year, because we've just had all of this time that producers have been sat at home.
Well,
hopefully, if people are doing the right thing, every producer should have been producing. That's the pandemic. It's your production time with no distractions to go out in clubs or anything. There might be some people who, for financial reasons or whatever, couldn't do what they want to do. But for most producers, that's the perfect time. And that's what I did during the pandemic. Early on, I decided that was when I was going to make the move over to Alan James. Yeah. Combination of reasons why I did that, but it was the perfect time too, because I had no tracks lined up for release at this stage and no DJ bookings lined up. So it was the perfect time if I'm going to make that swap. And I thought, I want to start. I hate finding names for new mixers. It's something I always struggle with. So I sort of did a Facebook post as you do, and someone I used to teach with, an English teacher, suggested bounce times because it works on so many levels. It works on like bounce times 2, bounce times 3, bounce times 4. It makes it sound like each one is building on the ones before it and is something bigger, which hopefully it is. It's also a nice little sort of maths pun in there because I'm a maths teacher.
Yeah.
And also kind of sounds a bit like a newspaper, and I don't know. That worked for me, and it meant that I could then have a sequence of mixers. I didn't have to have a new name every time.
Yeah.
And so the first bounce times, I'm pretty sure that's where I used the original version of The World.
Right, okay,
I did a bit of an edit of it with a Clayheads track and mashed them together a little bit. But that's where I first used The World. So
I remember you messaging me the mix.
So it was a mix that. And it wasn't a production mix by any means. It was one that had quite a few of my tracks on there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't meant to be a production series. And I was looking earlier on, I think I released that. We went into lockdown, the start of March or something? And this came out in May. So it wasn't something I spent masses of time making, but I had fun putting it together, and I think there might have been 1 or 2 new tracks on there, possibly. I don't know. And then after that, I thought, well, I'm going to spend lots and lots of time doing production. So Bounce Times 2 was I don't know offhand the date it came out, but it was the result of a lot of new productions, and it was 18 tracks, 14 of them were mine. And I think they were all things that I'd made, during lockdown. And that series has then become more of a production series. Then Bounce Times, and I used we're talking about Think About the Way. I think it might have been before we went on went live, but that was on Bounce Times 2. Bounce Times 3. By this point, I was like, right, this is going to be more of a production thing. There was one track I wanted to use on there that wasn't mine, but the other 18 of them were mine.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'd now started getting onto Bounce Heaven. So there's some Bounce Heaven tracks on there. I was starting out onto DNZ or DNZ, whichever you want to say. So there were sort of some bigger labels involved. And by the time this goes out, I won't be quite ready for Bounce Times 4.
Yeah.
But I've potentially got 20 tracks ready to go for it. So I'm waiting for feedback. We were talking about feedback earlier. I'm waiting for a little bit of feedback on a couple of them. And if they're good to go, then I think just decide the running order and then mix it. So I'm getting close. That's going to be a full production mix. So that's very much, I've lost momentum in terms of playing out. I'm hoping to get that back, in the near future. But I gained momentum in terms of releases. And then sort of 2021, I had so many tracks out, more than I ever had before. And this year I've had loads out as well. So yeah, I'd lost momentum in terms of DJing and playing out, but I gained, maybe because I didn't stream, because a lot of people went into streaming at the start of lockdown and I didn't. My internet connection back then wouldn't have coped, but fibre wasn't available then here. But yeah, so I lost momentum in one way but gained it in another. You also mentioned in terms of me being the go-to for sort of hard bounce. So this is where I think I've got my own kind of little niche that. I mean, what I make isn't really hard bounce.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
There's a crossover between the northern style, which is a bit like not cheesy but not melodic sort of thing, but and it's got that West Midlands sort of like pumping hard bounce. You've definitely like cracked where you are. Like,
Yeah.
That's where I was getting at. I just
Yeah.
obviously trying to word it out at the same time. But yeah, you understand where I was getting at.
Yeah, but I appreciate what you said about I've stuck to my guns and I make my thing.
Yeah.
Very much influenced by the laminators who we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Very much influenced by them. With lots and lots of little 8-bit sections, in tracks. But I'm also experimenting with, some hardcore hard style producers. I've started doing a little bit of bounce, and I'm influenced a little bit by them, trying to grab a little bit of that sound and some harder leads sometimes. The track I tried on Bounce Heaven, was very much. I was just trying to copy what Lee from Axel Gear Euphian does. Literally, I was trying to copy his style of leads.
Yeah.
And I'm messaging him, sort of talking about how he makes those leads, and I was like, right, I'm going to try that, and that's how that track came about. And yeah, the sounds that I like, but I also love sort of having trancier sound. So I'll often, we were talking about keys earlier on. So when I started production, I didn't have a clue what a key was or anything, or how to structure a chord. But once I'd found that stuff out, I love running, little arps and little fast-paced chords through tunes, just to give them a bit of extra energy and make them a little bit trancey, a bit more melodic. Now, the hard bounce sound doesn't ever have that. So I sometimes think that people that think of bounce as just hard house with an offbeat probably think the stuff I do is a bit too trancey, a bit too happy.
Yeah. But you've, as I say, you found your
yeah,
niche.
but it is the sound is the sound, and I don't make it to try and appeal to somebody else. I love getting releases, and I love it when I get positive feedback. But at the same time, I'm still just trying to make the thing that I want to make.
Absolutely. So that brings us through to today. Really, so post-pandemic and stuff like that. So you've had your releases on Bounce Heaven, DNZ. What have you got?
Chubby Tunes.
Oh, Chubby Tunes. Yeah, you have. You had a release, and hopefully more to come as well. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. So what have you got coming up then?
So I have this is potentially going out on Friday, isn't it?
Yes.
So in that case, it'll only be 3 days until my next Bounce Heaven release, which is called I Love You.
Yeah.
Which is, do you remember I Love You Always? Apologies for my singing. Do you remember that track from, you're a little bit younger than me, aren't you? Okay.
I'm quite knowledgeable of old music though. So.
The original came out in like 1996, I think it was. It's not a dance track, but it was like really sort of...
Who was that artist, sorry?
She's a one-hit wonder, and every time somebody asks me that, I have to look it up. You can, when you do your post editing, you put the name.
I'll have a look.
But I got the artwork today for the release. That's the Monday just after this comes out. After that, I've got lots of tracks that are ready to be sent off. But because of Bounce Times 4, and that's kind of my focus a little bit. So I've decided I've not sent any of them out yet. I decided I'm going to get Bounce Times 4 sorted as I want it first.
It feels special, doesn't it?
And then and that will essentially be, the oldest track that's probably going to make it on there was made in October of last year. So it's kind of like being the best part of a year work in progress. It's almost like an anthology of everything I've made since the last Bounce Times. I've made 21 tracks since then, but one of them I made for somebody, and there's one little thing I'm not sure if he wants changing in it, so that's not going to make it in. But I think the other 20 are. So yeah, there are lots of tracks on there that are ready to go, but I've not sent them out to labels yet. I've not actually decided which to go into which labels necessarily. But Bounce Times 4 will be, that's
the big one.
Yeah, when you've been putting in a year's worth of work into a mix, it's special to me.
Absolutely. Like I say, it's attention to detail. That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah,
and I'm not going to rush the mix of it. If I mix it once and there's one tiny little thing I'm not happy with, it'll be coming out until I'm completely happy. And we're talking about feedback as well. Wayne will have it to listen to, and I'll get the okay from him before it goes out to anyone.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do if he stopped listening to my stuff. So yeah, and then 22nd of October, I think it is. Bring the Bounce Back.
Right. Okay.
Probably the biggest event I've played at.
Right. Okay. Who's on?
Lisa Pinup.
Yeah.
Dawson, back to back with Tom Berry.
Yeah.
Charlie Bosch.
Yeah.
Mark Daniels, who people from the sort of the more northern scene won't necessarily know Mark, but Mark playing back to back with Kieran B. That is going to be probably the hardest bounce set anybody's ever heard.
Right.
If you listen to Mark's productions, you know where we're going with that. Eggman is playing back to back with Little Miss Jules, who Little Miss Jules is actually involved with 12 Inch Thumpers now. So they're playing back to back. Pluto, Alex Broth is playing as well. And then the guys who run the event, Ross and Danny, are playing a set. Oh, and me.
Right, yeah. So yeah, it's quite a stacked lineup when you think about it. Fantastic.
And that event, incidentally, it's been a long time coming because it was so we had 2 big, very successful Bring the Bounce Back events, sellout events. The third event was going to be in the January just before the pandemic, and then just before Christmas, ticket sales weren't going great. Now it might well be because it was Christmas and people wait until afterwards, but it was decided, rather than risk it, it was decided to pull the event. And instead of putting on again another event at Suki 10C, which is like a small club in Birmingham, we decided actually let's go for Tunnel Club, Subway City. Let's make it bigger, but let's kickstart it. And kind of have mixed feelings about it, but it went down so well. The Kickstarter raised the £500 target, which is the cost for the venue. I hope that's not anything confidential. But it raised the funding. It doesn't pay for the DJs, but it pays for the venue. The Kickstarter went live maybe 3 weeks before the lockdown started. Okay. And it made its target and then some. Right. The plan was every £100 to release another DJ. Well, each day we're making, it just went so quickly. By the end of the Kickstarter though, we were in lockdown. Right. So that event that was scheduled for 2020 obviously didn't happen. Yeah. And it got rearranged a couple of times for provisional dates, assuming events were up, and events weren't up. Yeah. And then in the end, it's decided, right, rather than keep postponing, we're going to let all the other events. I say we. I mean, I don't run the brand, but I'm a resident for it. It was decided that rather than put in a provisional date, let's just let all the other brands that are doing their, rearranged events, let all of them go ahead with theirs, and we'll put ours much further and kick it into the long grass. So that event is going to be this October.
Fantastic.
And it's obviously been such a long time, it's well over 2.5 years since it was originally kickstarted. But it's come together brilliantly. Ticket sales looking very healthy. Really, really excited by that. And, to be on I was saying earlier about being on the same lineup as Rob Teixeira. Now it's going to be on the same lineup as Lisa Pinup and the rest of that lineup. Without Lisa, that would be an incredible lineup. Yeah. Dawson back to back with Tom Berry.
Right. Tom Berry is fantastic.
And if you ever seen Dawson's not as big a name as Tom Berry, but he is, in terms of his skills, if you ever watch him on a mixer, Andy Whitby is kind of similar. You just watch him do this stuff that, I'm a DJ and I've no idea what he's doing, but it sounds incredible. Yeah. And a lot of DJs will then try and, a lot of DJs, in my personal opinion, overdo it on a mixer. And I'm like, if that track sounded better with a phaser there, I would have put a phaser there and I would have made the engine of the track. Yeah. A lot of DJs, I think, in my personal opinion, overdo it on the mixer, and they're trying to make the track sound better, but it doesn't, and the track would have been produced like that if it sounded better. However, when Dawson does it, or when Whitby does it, there's certain DJs do it, it just sounds incredible. And Dawson, to me, should be much, much, much better known than he is. Yeah. And so him back to back with Tom Berry, I think is going to be a really special set.
Amazing, mate. I've just realised that I didn't upload my Google Chrome document for the questions. Okay. So apologies, there's no questions this week from listeners. So instead of doing the question section, we'll just tie it up with the question that I don't need to write down because, I should know this off by heart by now. But if you were to get the electric chair because you were... let's see, what have you done? you've blew the speakers in a club because you've went in too hard when you played a tune and said, you know what, we're just going to tie you up to the sound system, electric chair. But you can have one more meal. What are you going to have? What are you going to have?
So you got to red line to headline, yeah?
Yeah. Red line.
I don't believe that. Okay, I would have, let's go controversial. I would go for a pineapple-based Hawaiian pizza with extra pineapple. I once wanted a pineapple pizza, and the shop I was buying it from had no Hawaiian pizzas, so I bought a whole tin of pineapple, put it on top. But alongside my pineapple pizza, there's a smokehouse just up the road that I tried just a few weeks ago, and I'd have one of their milkshakes with it, because their milkshakes is the best milkshake I've ever had. I would name drop them, but I can't remember the name of the place now. But it's just up the road. I think it's Hickory's. Right. I think they're a chain, but this is the only one that I've been to. I'd have one of their milkshakes with it, because that was absolutely divine.
Right. I take back everything I said about Alan. You just went down in my estimation with a pineapple pizza, man.
How can you not?
No, it's the sweet and it doesn't go, the cheese and the sweet, and no, not for me. Are you having dessert? Oh well, obviously the milkshake actually.
The milkshake is kind of like, there's so much ice cream in it. Effectively, is a dessert.
Right. Okay. So where can people find you?
Okay, the best place. Now, this is something I need to do more of, is social media, because I don't use Instagram. I tried doing TikTok because people said that's a place to be, and even tracks that aren't released and aren't completely free of copyright still get muted on there. I don't understand it. So the best place is, I've got a Facebook page, Alan James, DJ producer, and my SoundCloud, 8-bit Alan James.
Right, there you go. I just want to say thank you for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Check this guy out. Amazing. Also, if you've enjoyed the podcast, then share it with your mates, because it does go a long way. Where every individual person shares it, someone might not have heard it. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next time.
Cheers.